When everything falls apart, the fluorescent lights in the hospital corridor buzzed softly as Natalie Brooks sat hunched in an uncomfortable plastic chair, her head resting against the cold wall. At 23 years old, she had become all too familiar with these sterile hallways, the antiseptic smell, and the weight of medical bills that seemed to multiply faster than she could count them. Her phone buzzed for the tea. Another creditor? Another reminder that life had a cruel way of piling problems on top of each other until you could barely breathe. Miss Brooks? A nurse appeared, her smile professionally sympathetic. Your father is awake now. He's asking for you. Natalie stood quickly, smoothing down her wrinkled uniform from the hotel where she worked the morning shift. She hadn't had time to change before rushing here after her father's emergency admission. Walking into room 347, she found Henry Brooks looking smaller than she remembered. His usually robust frame diminished against the white hospital sheets. Dad. She forced brightness into her voice, taking his hand. How are you feeling? Henry's weathered face creased with worry rather than pain. Natalie, sweetheart, the doctor said I need surgery soon, but the insurance won't cover most of it. I heard them talking about costs, and I just can't put you and your mother through this. Don't you dare. Natalie squeezed his hand tighter. We'll figure it out. We always do. But even as she said the words, doubt gnawed at her insides. The surgery would cost nearly $90,000. Between her 2 jobs as a hotel receptionist and evening tutor, she barely made enough to cover rent and groceries. Her younger sister Melody was halfway through nursing school on a partial scholarship. Their mother Diana worked part-time at a local library. Her own health too fragile for more demanding work, they were drowning. And Natalie had no idea how to save them. An unexpected proposition 3 days later. Natalie was wiping down tables at the hotel restaurant during her extended shift when Oliver Chen approached her. She recognized him immediately as one of the regular guests who stayed in the executive suites. He was always polite, tipping generously, and treating staff with unusual respect for someone who clearly had money. Miss Brooks, do you have a moment? Oliver asked, his tone serious but kind. Natalie glanced around the nearly empty restaurant. Her supervisor had stepped out for a break. Of course, Mr. Chen. Is something wrong with your room? Nothing like that. Oliver gestured to a corner table away from the few remaining diners. I have a rather unusual proposition for you, and I need you to hear me out completely before you respond. Something in his tone made Natalie's heart race. She sat down carefully, her hands folded in her lap. Oliver leaned forward, choosing his words carefully. I'm aware this will sound strange, but I've gotten to know you over the past few months during my stays here. You're intelligent, honest, hardworking, and from what I understand, you're facing a significant financial challenge with your father's medical situation. Natalie stiffened. How do you know about that? Your coworker mentioned it when I inquired why you seemed distressed, Oliver explained. I'm not trying to pry. I'm trying to help. My employer is a man named Cameron Westbrook. Have you heard of him? Natalie shook her head, though the name sounded vaguely familiar. Cameron is the founder of Apex Innovations, a tech company worth about $3 billion. His father passed away 6 months ago, leaving him the company under one very specific condition. Cameron must be married within 1 year of his father's death, or the controlling shares go to his business partners instead, Natalie said slowly. Not understanding where this was going, Oliver continued. Cameron has 2 weeks left to meet this condition. He's a brilliant businessman but has zero interest in relationships. His focus has always been entirely on work. He needs a wife, on paper. For approximately 6 months until the inheritance is fully secured and he can restructure the company ownership, the implication hit Natalie like a truck. You're asking me to marry a stranger for money? Proposing a business arrangement, Oliver corrected gently. A contract marriage. You would live in Cameron's residence, attend necessary social functions, and maintain the appearance of a legitimate marriage for 6 months. In return, you would receive $250,000. Half up front, half at the completion of the contract. Natalie's mouth went dry. $250,000. It would cover her father's surgery, pay off their debts, and leave enough to help Melody finish school. It would change everything. "This is insane," she whispered. Oliver agreed. "But it's also legal, clearly defined, and mutually beneficial. Cameron is not a bad person, Natalie. He's just someone who has built walls around himself for so long that he doesn't know how to let anyone in. This arrangement would be strictly professional." The meeting that changed everything 2 days after that conversation, Natalie found herself in the lobby of the Pinnacle building, home to Apex Innovations. She wore her nicest dress, a simple navy blue number she'd bought on clearance 2 years ago, and felt completely out of place among the sleek marble floors and modern art installations. Oliver met her at the elevator. "Thank you for coming. Cameron is waiting in his office. Just be yourself." The executive floor was a study in minimalist luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city skyline. And there, standing by those windows, with his back to her, was Cameron Westbrook. When he turned around, Natalie understood why Oliver had been so confident in this plan. Cameron was tall, probably 6'2", with dark hair that looked professionally styled, but slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. His suit was impeccably tailored, and his face had the kind of sharp, intelligent features that belonged on magazine covers. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, a striking gray blue that seemed to look right through her. "Miss Brooks." His voice was deep and formal. "Thank you for considering this arrangement." "I haven't agreed to anything yet," Natalie replied, lifting her chin despite her nerves. A small smile touched his lips, so brief she almost missed it. "Fair enough. Please, sit." They settled into leather chairs facing each other, Oliver standing discreetly to the side. "I'll be direct," Cameron began. "I need a wife to satisfy my father's archaic requirements. You need money for your family's medical expenses? This arrangement benefits us both. For 6 months, you would live in my home, attend social events as my wife, and maintain the illusion that we are a happily married couple. After 6 months, we divorce quietly, citing irreconcilable differences. You walk away with $250,000 and your freedom. What exactly would maintaining the illusion involve?" Natalie asked, proud that her voice remained steady. "Public appearances, dinners with business associates, family gatherings. We would have separate bedrooms, separate lives within the house. Think of it as roommates who happen to be legally married. And if someone discovers the truth," Cameron's jaw tightened, "that cannot happen. If the board suspects this marriage is fraudulent, I lose everything my father built, which is why I need someone trustworthy, someone with character." "You don't even know me," Natalie pointed out. "Oliver has been observing you for months. He's an excellent judge of character. And frankly, Miss Brooks, I'm running out of time and options." There was something almost vulnerable in that admission, hidden beneath his controlled exterior. Natalie thought of her father, lying in that hospital bed, trying to be brave while terrified about the costs. She thought of her mother's worried face, the dark circles under her eyes from lack of sleep. She thought of Melody, working nights at a diner to help pay for textbooks. "I need to see a contract," she said. "Everything in writing. Legal protection for both of us." Cameron nodded, respect flickering in those gray-blue eyes. "Of course. Oliver has already drafted preliminary terms. You should have your own lawyer review them." "I can't afford a lawyer." "Then I'll pay for one. An independent attorney not connected to me in any way. You need to feel secure in this arrangement, Natalie." "May I call you Natalie?" "Yes." She swallowed hard. "And I'll call you Cameron." "Good." He stood, extending his hand. "Take 3 days. Review the contract. Ask any questions. If you agree, we'll need to move quickly. The clock is not on our side." Natalie shook his hand, feeling the firm, warm grip, and wondered what she was getting herself into. As she left the building, her phone buzzed with a text from the hospital. Her father's surgery had been scheduled for 2 weeks from now. They needed a deposit of $30,000 by Friday. The universe, it seemed, was making the decision for her, signing away 6 months. When Natalie returned to the Pinnacle building 72 hours later, she carried a folder containing the contract she'd reviewed with the lawyer Cameron had hired for her. The attorney, a sharp woman named Beverly Morrison, had assured her the terms were fair and ironclad. It's unusual, Beverly had said, but it's legal. And frankly, Miss Brooks, the protections built into this contract are extraordinary. He's being more than fair. Now, sitting across from Cameron again, Natalie took a deep breath. I have some conditions of my own. Cameron leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. I'm listening. First, my family can never know the real nature of this arrangement. We'll need a believable story about how we met. Agreed. We met at a charity fundraiser 3 months ago. We kept the relationship private to avoid media attention. Second, I want to continue sending money to help my sister with school beyond what's needed for my father's surgery. Can we structure the payment so I receive a monthly amount? Cameron considered this. That's actually better for tax purposes. We can set it up as a monthly allowance, as would be normal for a spouse. Third, Natalie continued, her voice stronger now, when this ends, you leave my family alone. No contact, no interference. They'll think we divorce naturally, and you move on with your life. Something flickered across Cameron's face. Pain? Resignation? It was gone too quickly to identify. Agreed, he said quietly. They spent the next hour going through final details. The wedding would happen in 5 days at City Hall, with Oliver and his wife as witnesses. Natalie would move into Cameron's penthouse immediately after. They would announce the marriage to his family and business associates at a small dinner party the following week. One more thing, Cameron added, as they prepared to sign. My Aunt Patricia will likely be skeptical. She knew my father well and shares his suspicions about people's motives. She'll be watching us closely. Then we'll have to be convincing, Natalie replied. As she signed her name on the contract, Natalie felt the weight of what she was doing settle over her shoulders. She was essentially selling 6 months of her life. Her freedom, her truth. But when she thought of her father getting the surgery he needed, of the relief on her mother's face, it felt worth it. Cameron signed his name beside hers, then looked up. I know this isn't what you imagined for your life, Natalie. For what it's worth, I'll try to make these 6 months as easy as possible for you. And I'll try to be a convincing wife, she replied. Neither of them could have known then how prophetic those words would become, or how difficult it would be to separate pretend from reality when hearts got involved. Moving into a gilded cage, though. Penthouse occupied the entire 42nd floor of the Meridian Tower, and Natalie felt her breath catch as the private elevator doors opened directly into the foyer. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around 3 sides of the space, offering a panoramic view of the city that made her feel like she was floating above the world. The interior was all clean lines and expensive materials, polished concrete floors warmed by strategic rugs, furniture that looked like art installations, and lighting that seemed to glow from nowhere and everywhere at once. Your room is down this hall, Cameron said, leading her past a kitchen that belonged in an architectural magazine. You have your own bathroom, walk-in closet, and sitting area. I'm on the opposite side of the penthouse, so we'll have privacy. Natalie wheeled her single suitcase behind her, acutely aware of how little she owned compared to the obvious wealth surrounding her. Cameron opened a door to reveal a bedroom that was easily 3 times the size of her entire apartment. The king-sized bed was dressed in crisp white linens, and through another door, she could see a bathroom with a soaking tub and a shower that could fit for people. This is too much, she whispered. It's appropriate for my wife. Cameron replied, his tone matter of fact. Speaking of which, we need to establish some ground rules. My housekeeper, Grace, comes 3 times a week. She's discreet but observant. When she's here, we need to maintain appearances. Same with anyone else who might visit. Kind of appearances? Natalie asked, setting her suitcase down. Cameron ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as his tell for discomfort. Casual affection. Using first names. Seeming comfortable in each other's space. Grace has known me since I was a teenager. She'll notice if we act like strangers. Okay. Natalie nodded, trying to absorb the reality of her new life. What about meals? Daily schedules? I usually eat breakfast around 6 before heading to the office. I work late most nights. Weekends I often go into the office as well. He paused, then added with something almost like apology, I'm not home much. You'll have plenty of space to yourself. It struck Natalie then how lonely that sounded. Here was a man who had everything, except apparently a life outside of work. "What should I do with my time?" she asked. "I'm used to working 2 jobs. I can't just sit here for 6 months." Cameron seemed to consider this. "You could take classes. Pursue interests you never had time for. Use the gym on the building's amenity floor. Whatever you want, really. Just be available for the events we need to attend together." "I want to volunteer," Natalie decided suddenly. "At the hospital where my dad had his surgery. I could read to patients or help in the children's wing." For the first time, Cameron's expression softened genuinely. "That's a good idea. Just clear it with Oliver first for security purposes. Some volunteer positions require background checks, and I'd rather control that narrative." Over the next 3 days, Natalie slowly adjusted to her new reality. She met Grace, a warm woman in her 50s, who immediately took to Natalie and seemed genuinely delighted that Cameron had finally found someone. She learned how to operate the complicated coffee machine, discovered that Cameron had a massive collection of old vinyl records hidden in a cabinet, and found herself wandering the penthouse late at night when sleep wouldn't come. On one of those sleepless nights, she found Cameron on the terrace standing at the railing with a glass of something amber in his hand. The city lights sparkled below them like scattered jewels. "Can't sleep?" he asked without turning around. "Strange bed," Natalie replied, moving to stand beside him. "Strange life." Cameron glanced at her, and in the dim light his features seemed less harsh. "Having regrets?" "No. My dad's surgery is scheduled for next week." "That's real." "This," she gestured at the penthouse, at him, at herself, "this is temporary." "I can handle temporary, can you?" He took a sip of his drink. "The dinner with my family is tomorrow night. That's when this gets real. My Aunt Patricia isn't easy to fool." "Tell me about her," Natalie said. Wanting to be prepared, Cameron was quiet for a moment, then began, "Patricia is my father's younger sister. She never married, dedicated her entire life to the family business. She's brilliant, ruthless, and has a gift for seeing through people. When my parents died in a car accident when I was 15, she wanted to take me in. But my father's will specified that his business partner, Gerald Hammond, should be my guardian. That must have hurt her. Right. It did. And it made her suspicious of everyone's motives ever since. She'll be looking for cracks in our story, Natalie. We need to be flawless." Natalie shivered. Whether from the night air or nerves, she wasn't sure. Cameron immediately shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. The gesture was so natural, so instinctively protective, that it caught them both off guard. "Thank you," she murmured, pulling the jacket closer. It smelled like expensive cologne and something uniquely him. They stood in silence for a while, looking out at the city. Finally, Cameron spoke again, his voice lower. "My father was like Patricia in many ways. Always testing, always suspicious. He used to tell me that love was a luxury that men in our position couldn't afford. That every relationship was transactional, whether people admitted it or not. That's a sad way to live," Natalie said softly. "It's a realistic way to live," Cameron corrected. "Look at us. We're literally in a transactional relationship." "True," Natalie acknowledged. "But at least we're honest about it. That's more than most people can say." Cameron looked at her then, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone more jaded, more cynical. Someone who saw this purely as a business opportunity." "I did see it as a business opportunity," Natalie replied. "But that doesn't mean I've stopped being human. I still feel things." "Care about things? Like what?" The question seemed genuine, curious. Natalie thought for a moment. "Like the fact that you're out here alone at 2 in the morning, drinking by yourself? That tells me you're worried about tomorrow. And that underneath all the business suits and contracts, you actually care what your aunt thinks of you." Cameron's jaw tightened. "You don't know me well enough to make those assessments." "Maybe not," Natalie agreed. "But I'm going to be your wife tomorrow, even if it's just on paper. I should at least try to understand you." He didn't respond, but he didn't walk away either. They stayed there on the terrace until the first hints of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. Two strangers bound by a contract, beginning to realize they might be more complicated than either had anticipated. The family Dinar Patricia Westbrook arrived at the penthouse exactly on time, which Cameron had warned Natalie was typical. She was a striking woman in her late 50s, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that missed nothing. She wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than Natalie's car, and carried herself with the confidence of someone who had spent decades in boardrooms. "So," Patricia said, accepting a glass of wine, but barely sipping it, "you're the mysterious woman who captured my nephew's heart. Forgive me for being surprised." Cameron has never been one for romance. "Love has a way of sneaking up on you when you least expect it," Natalie replied, grateful for the hours she and Cameron had spent rehearsing responses to likely questions. Patricia's eyes narrowed slightly. "How did you two meet?" Cameron slipped his arm around Natalie's waist, the touch sending an unexpected jolt through her. "At the Children's Hope Charity Gala last spring. Natalie was volunteering at the registration table. She didn't know who I was and treated me like everyone else. It was refreshing. I thought he was rude at first," Natalie added, remembering their scripted story. "He kept asking complicated questions about the foundation's allocation of funds. I almost told him to stop holding up the line." Patricia's lips twitched. "That sounds like Cameron. And when did this friendship become romance?" "Gradually," Cameron said, his thumb unconsciously tracing small circles on Natalie's side through her dress. "I found myself looking for excuses to see her, making donations that required in-person discussions. Eventually, I admitted to myself it was more than professional interest." The way he said it, with just the right amount of vulnerability, almost made Natalie believe it herself. He was a better actor than she'd given him credit for. Oliver and his wife Rachel arrived next, providing a brief respite from Patricia's interrogation. Then came Gerald Hammond, Cameron's former guardian and current business partner. A jovial man in his 60s who seemed genuinely pleased about the marriage. "About time you settled down," Gerald boomed, clapping Cameron on the shoulder. "Your father would be proud. He always said a man needs a good woman to keep him grounded." Patricia interjected coolly. "I recall father saying quite the opposite. That marriage was a distraction from building legacy." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Cameron's arm tightened around Natalie. "Perhaps he changed his mind before he died," Cameron suggested carefully. "The will does require marriage for inheritance, a requirement you're fulfilling with remarkable timing," Patricia observed. Just weeks before the deadline, Natalie felt Cameron tense beside her, and something protective rose in her chest. "Are you suggesting this marriage isn't genuine?" she asked, her voice calm but with an edge of steel. Patricia turned her sharp gaze on Natalie. "I'm suggesting the timing is convenient." "Life is full of convenient timing," Natalie replied. "My father needed emergency heart surgery last month. If I hadn't been working at that hotel when Oliver Chen checked in, if Oliver hadn't mentioned me to Cameron, if Cameron hadn't decided to help with my father's medical expenses out of kindness, we might not be here. Sometimes coincidences align. That doesn't make them conspiracies." It was a risky move, weaving truth into their fabricated story, but it worked. Patricia's expression softened fractionally. "He helped with your father's surgery?" "Before we were engaged," Natalie confirmed, the lie feeling less like a lie when it contained kernels of truth. "He didn't have to, but he did. That's when I knew he was more than the cold businessman everyone thought he was." Cameron looked down at her, and the surprise in his eyes was genuine. They hadn't rehearsed that addition to the story, but it worked perfectly. "Well," Patricia said after a moment, "perhaps I've been too cynical. If Cameron has found someone who brings out his better nature, then I should be supportive rather than suspicious." The rest of the dinner went more smoothly. They ate the meal Grace had prepared, drank wine, told stories that painted Cameron and Natalie as a couple who had fallen in love despite their different worlds. By the time dessert was served, even Patricia seemed almost convinced. But as the guests were leaving, Patricia pulled Natalie aside. "A word of advice," the older woman said quietly. "My nephew has spent his entire life building walls. If you've truly managed to breach them, guard that privilege carefully. But if this is something else, something calculated. Know that I will discover it. And I don't forgive deception. I understand, Natalie replied, meeting Patricia's gaze steadily. But maybe the question isn't whether this marriage is real. Maybe it's whether it has the potential to become real. Patricia studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Perhaps you're wiser than I gave you credit for. When walls began to crack after everyone left, Natalie collapsed onto the couch, emotionally exhausted. Cameron loosened his tie and poured himself a drink. That went better than expected, he said. Your improvisation about me helping with your father's surgery was brilliant. It made the story more believable, Natalie replied. And honestly, you did help. Just through this arrangement rather than directly. Cameron sat down on the opposite end of the couch, maintaining careful distance. Patricia will still be watching us. Tonight was round 1. There will be more tests. I know. Natalie pulled off her heels, rubbing her sore feet. Your aunt is formidable. She's lonely, Cameron said suddenly. That's what makes her so sharp. She gave up everything for the family business and never let anyone get close. She sees threats everywhere because she's never experienced real connection. Is that what you think you're doing? Natalie asked softly. Giving up connection for business? Cameron didn't answer immediately. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass, watching the light play through it. I think I never learned how to have real connections. My parents died when I was young. Gerald raised me, but he was always more interested in the company than in me as a person. I learned early that business relationships were more reliable than emotional ones. That's really sad. Cameron, it's practical, he corrected. But there was less conviction in his voice. Natalie drew her legs up under her, turning to face him more fully. Can I ask you something personal? Depends on the question. Have you ever been in love? Real love, not just dating? Cameron was quiet for so long that Natalie thought he might not answer. Finally, he spoke. Once when I was in college, her name was Jessica. She was an art student, completely different from my world. We dated for 2 years. I thought maybe I could have both, the business empire and the personal life. Then my father found out. What happened? He hired a private investigator, discovered that Jessica's family had significant debts. He assumed she was with me for money and made her a cash offer to end the relationship. She took it. Cameron's voice was carefully emotionless, but Natalie could hear the old pain underneath. That's when I learned my father was right. Everything is transactional. At least when you acknowledge it up front, you can't be blindsided. Cameron, I'm so sorry. Don't be. It taught me a valuable lesson. He stood abruptly. I should get some work done. Thank you for your performance tonight. You were excellent. He walked away. Before Natalie could respond, leaving her alone in the vast living room. She sat there for a long time, thinking about the man she'd married. He wasn't cold or calculating, she realized. He was wounded and defensive. Someone who had learned to see betrayal in every corner because he'd experienced it. From the people who should have protected him most. And despite knowing this was temporary, despite the contract and the clear boundaries, Natalie felt her heart ache for him. The following week fell into an unexpected rhythm. Cameron left early for work, but started coming home for dinner more often. They'd sit across from each other at the dining table, and gradually, conversation came more easily. He asked about her volunteer work at the hospital, and she asked about his projects at Apex Innovations. They discovered they both loved old movies and started watching them together on weekends. A habit that felt domestic and comfortable. Her father's surgery went well. And when Cameron insisted on visiting him in the hospital, Natalie saw a different side of him. He sat by Henry's bedside, talking about business and sports, making her father laugh despite the pain. Diana Brooks was completely charmed, already treating Cameron like the son she'd never had. He found a good one, her father told Natalie during one visit. He reminds me of myself when I was young. Driven, but with a good heart underneath. The guilt of the deception ate at Natalie, but she pushed it down. This was temporary. In a few months, she'd tell them it hadn't worked out, and everyone would move on with their lives. But late at night, when she couldn't sleep and found Cameron on the terrace again, or when their hands accidentally brushed, reaching for the same thing, and they both felt that spark of electricity, Natalie wondered if moving on would be as simple as they'd planned. The charity gala. Real test came 3 weeks into their marriage at the annual Apex Innovations Charity Gala. It was the company's biggest social event, attended by investors, competitors, media, and everyone who mattered in their industry. Cameron had been tense all week preparing for it. "Everyone will be watching us," he warned as they got ready. "Especially Jennifer Hartley." "Who's Jennifer Hartley?" Natalie asked, struggling with the zipper on her gown. Cameron came up behind her, gently taking over the zipper. His fingers brushed her bare back and she shivered. "My ex-girlfriend. We dated briefly 2 years ago. She expected an engagement ring. I ended things when I realized she was more interested in the Westbrook name than in me." "Sounds like a pattern," Natalie observed, then immediately regretted it. But Cameron just laughed. A real laugh that transformed his usually serious face. "You're not wrong. Here, you're done." When Natalie turned around, she found him staring at her. She wore a deep emerald gown that Oliver's wife Rachel had helped her choose, and her hair was styled in soft waves over one shoulder. "You look beautiful," Cameron said, and the compliment sounded surprised, as if he'd just now realized it. "You clean up pretty well yourself," Natalie replied. Taking in his perfectly tailored tuxedo at the gala held in a historic ballroom downtown, Natalie was immediately overwhelmed by the opulence. Crystal chandeliers, champagne flowing freely, women in designer gowns, men in tuxedos that cost more than her entire wardrobe. Cameron's hand found the small of her back, steadying her. "Just stay close to me," he murmured. "And remember, we're madly in love." They made it through about 20 minutes of mingling before Jennifer Hartley materialized in front of them. She was stunning in a red gown that left little to the imagination, with platinum blonde hair and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Cameron, darling," she purred, completely ignoring Natalie. "I heard rumors you'd gotten married, but I simply couldn't believe it. You always swore marriage was for fools." "People change, Jennifer," Cameron replied coolly. "Jennifer Hartley. This is my wife, Natalie Westbrook." "Westbrook," Jennifer repeated, her eyes raking over Natalie with undisguised disdain. "How quaint. And what do you do, Natalie? Are you in tech?" "I volunteer at Children's Memorial Hospital," Natalie replied, keeping her voice pleasant. "And I'm taking classes in early childhood education." "How charitable," Jennifer said in a tone that made it sound like an insult. Cameron always did have a soft spot for charity cases. "Tell me, how exactly did you two meet?" "The story seems to change depending on who's telling it." Before Natalie could respond, Cameron pulled her closer against his side. "We met exactly how we've told everyone. And frankly, Jennifer, my wife's background is none of your concern. Now, if you'll excuse us, they're about to start dinner." He guided Natalie away, his jaw tight with anger. "I'm sorry about her. She's always been vindictive." "It's fine," Natalie assured him, though her heart was pounding. "People like her don't bother me." But Jennifer's words had planted seeds of doubt. How many others here thought she was just a charity case? How many were whispering behind their champagne flutes about the mysterious nobody who had somehow trapped Cameron Westbrook? Dinner was an ordeal of small talk and careful navigation of questions about their relationship. Natalie smiled until her face hurt, held Cameron's hand under the table when he squeezed hers for reassurance, and played the role of devoted wife so thoroughly that she almost believed it herself. When dinner finally ended and the dancing began, Cameron led her to the floor. "One more hurdle," he said quietly as he pulled her into his arms. "Then we can leave." The orchestra was playing something slow and romantic. Natalie had never been much of a dancer, but Cameron guided her with surprising grace. One hand at her waist, the other holding hers gently. "You're doing great," he murmured. "Everyone's buying it, are they?" Natalie looked up at him, finding his face much closer than she'd expected. "Or are they all thinking what Jennifer said, that I'm just a charity case you took pity on? I don't care what they think." "Yes, you do. That's why we're doing this whole thing. You care about the business, about the legacy, about proving yourself to your father's memory." Cameron's steps faltered slightly. "You're right. I do care about those things. But tonight, dancing with you, I find myself caring about something else." "What?" Natalie's heart was racing, and it wasn't from the dancing. I care about the fact that Jennifer's nasty comments hurt you. I care that you've been smiling all night despite being uncomfortable. I care that my hand fits perfectly in the small of your back, and that when you laugh at something genuinely funny, your whole face lights up. Cameron, we can't. I know, he interrupted. I know what this is. I know what we agreed to. But would it really be so terrible if we enjoyed each other's company? If we became friends during this arrangement? Friends? The word should have been a relief, a safe middle ground between the cold contract and dangerous territory. But looking into Cameron's eyes, seeing the walls he'd built beginning to crack, Natalie knew that friendship might be even more dangerous than falling in love. Because friends cared about each other. Friends missed each other when they were gone, and in 6 months, she would be gone. Friends, she agreed softly, letting him pull her a little closer. We can be friends. As they swayed to the music, surrounded by people who didn't know the truth, Natalie felt the first real stirrings of fear. Not fear of being discovered, but fear of what was happening in her own heart. She was starting to care about Cameron Westbrook, not the billionaire, not the business arrangement, but the man underneath who played piano when he was stressed, who was kind to her father, who was learning to smile again. This was supposed to be simple, a transaction. 6 months and done, but nothing about falling for someone was ever simple. Even when you knew you shouldn't be falling at all, the cracks in the foundation morning light filtered through the penthouse windows as Natalie stood in the kitchen, attempting to make breakfast. She'd woken early after another restless night, her mind churning with thoughts she couldn't quite organize. Since the gala 2 weeks ago, something had shifted between her and Cameron. The careful distance they'd maintained was eroding. Replaced by something far more complicated, Cameron emerged from his room looking unusually disheveled. His hair damp from a shower, wearing casual clothes instead of his usual suit. "You're up early," he observed, eyeing the eggs she was scrambling with amusement. "Are those supposed to be edible?" "I'm a terrible cook," Natalie admitted with a laugh. "My mom tried to teach me, but I never had the patience for it." "Move over," Cameron said, gently nudging her aside. "Let me show you." They stood shoulder to shoulder at the stove, Cameron guiding her hands as he demonstrated the proper way to scramble eggs. His chest was pressed against her back, his arms around hers, and Natalie felt every nerve in her body come alive. This was dangerous territory, this casual intimacy that felt far too natural. "Like this," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "Low heat, constant motion. You want them creamy, not rubbery. Since when do you know how to cook?" Natalie asked, trying to focus on anything other than how good he smelled, like soap and something woodsy. "Grace taught me when I was a teenager. Said I needed at least one practical skill." He released her hands, but didn't step back. "I don't do it often, but I remember the basics." They ate breakfast together on the terrace, something they'd started doing on weekends. The city stretched out below them, and for a moment, Natalie could almost forget this was all temporary. Almost forget she was counting down days until her life went back to normal. Whatever normal meant anymore. "My mother's birthday is next week," Cameron said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. "I usually visit her grave alone, but I thought maybe you'd come with me." Natalie looked at him in surprise. This was the first time he'd voluntarily shared something so personal. "I'd be honored to come with you. It's not part of the contract," he added quickly. "You don't have to." "I know. But I want to." She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Friends remember important days together?" Cameron's expression softened in that way it did sometimes now, the walls coming down inch by inch. "Thank you." The visit that changed everything. The cemetery was quiet on a Wednesday morning, located on a hillside overlooking the water. Cameron led Natalie to a simple but elegant headstone that read, "Eleanor Westbrook, beloved mother and wife." He knelt and placed fresh lilies at the base, his movements careful and reverent. Natalie hung back, giving him space, until he reached up and pulled her down beside him. "Mom, this is Natalie," he said softly, as naturally as if introducing them at a dinner party. "She's been helping me remember what it's like to actually live, not just exist. I think you'd like her. She calls me out on my nonsense." Natalie felt tears prick her eyes. The casual intimacy of the moment, the vulnerability Cameron was showing, was almost unbearable. She placed her own hand on the cool stone. "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Westbrook," she whispered. "Your son is a good man, even though he tries very hard to hide it behind spreadsheets and business meetings." Cameron let out a watery laugh. They sat there together in the grass, shoulders touching, as Cameron told stories about his mother. How she loved music and had insisted he learn piano. How she'd volunteered at soup kitchens and dragged his reluctant father along. How she died too young in a car accident that also took his father, leaving 15-year-old Cameron alone, except for his grandfather and Patricia. "I'm sorry you lost them so young," Natalie said when he finally fell silent. "That's not something you ever really get over," No, Cameron agreed. "You just learn to build your life around the hole they left behind." But lately he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Lately the hole doesn't feel quite as big." Their eyes met, and Natalie saw the question there. The confusion and fear, and something that looked dangerously close to hope. She felt it mirrored in her own chest, this growing awareness that what they'd started as a business arrangement had become something neither of them knew how to name. "Cameron," she began. Not knowing what she wanted to say, his phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He glanced at it, and his expression immediately closed off. "It's Patricia. She wants to meet with both of us tomorrow. Says it's urgent." A cold knot formed in Natalie's stomach. "Do you think she knows?" "I don't know." Cameron stood, offering her his hand to help her up. "But we need to be prepared for anything." Patricia's investigation. They met Patricia at an upscale restaurant downtown. The kind where the waiters moved like shadows and every table felt like a private booth. Patricia was already seated when they arrived, a folder conspicuously placed on the table beside her wine glass. "Thank you for coming," she said as they sat. Her expression was unreadable. "I'll get straight to the point. I've been conducting an investigation into your marriage." Natalie's heart plummeted. But Cameron's hand found hers under the table. Steadying her. "Investigation," Cameron repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "You hired someone to spy on us?" "I hired someone to verify what I suspected," Patricia corrected. "That this marriage was a convenient arrangement to satisfy your father's will. Nothing more." "And what did your investigation find?" Natalie asked, surprised her voice didn't shake. Patricia opened the folder, pulling out several pages. "That you, Natalie Brooks, were working 2 jobs when you met my nephew. That your father had catastrophic medical expenses. That Oliver Chen, Cameron's advisor, frequented the hotel where you worked. That you married Cameron exactly 3 weeks before the inheritance deadline. And that you received a significant sum of money immediately after the marriage." The evidence was damning, laid out in black and white. Natalie waited for Patricia to deliver the killing blow, to expose them completely. But instead, Patricia closed the folder and looked at them both with an expression that surprised Natalie. "Understanding. I also found," Patricia continued, "that Cameron visits your father in the hospital twice a week, even though you're working your volunteer shift and wouldn't know he was there. That you, Natalie, have started learning about Apex Innovations projects, staying up late to read technical journals so you can have intelligent conversations with Cameron about his work. That neighbors in this building have commented on hearing piano music late at night. Something Cameron hasn't done in years. And laughter coming from his penthouse, which he's never done." Cameron and Natalie exchanged glances, both confused about where this was going. "My father's will," Patricia said slowly, "had a specific clause about the marriage. It required that Cameron be married, yes, but it also included a provision that I, along with 2 board members, could challenge the inheritance if we believed the marriage was fraudulent. We were supposed to deliver our assessment yesterday, and Cameron's jaw was tight, and I've decided not to challenge it." Patricia took a sip of her wine, letting that sink in. "I've watched you both over these past weeks. Maybe it started as an arrangement, a practical solution to an impossible problem. But what I see now is 2 people who have stumbled into something real, even if you're both too stubborn or scared to admit it." Natalie felt tears threatening. "Mrs. Westbrook, Patricia, please." The older woman's expression softened. "I spent my entire life building walls, just like Cameron. I chose career over connection, logic over love. I look at you too, and I see what I could have had if I'd been brave enough to let someone in. Don't make my mistake. Don't let fear or pride or expired contracts destroy something genuine. I don't understand, Cameron said. You're saying you knew this was an arrangement from the beginning? I suspected, but suspecting and knowing are different things. And more importantly, what something starts as doesn't determine what it becomes. Patricia stood, gathering her folder. I've told the board that the marriage is legitimate. Your inheritance is secure, Cameron. What you do with your personal life from here is your choice. But if you throw away someone who looks at you the way Natalie does, you're a fool. She left them sitting there in stunned silence. Truth and consequences they didn't speak on the ride home. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words and questions neither seemed ready to ask. Back at the penthouse, Cameron immediately poured himself a drink while Natalie stood by the windows. Watching the city lights blur through her tears. We need to talk about this, Cameron finally said. About what? Natalie turned to face him. About the fact that we got caught but your aunt decided to let it slide. Or about the fact that she called us out on something we've been desperately trying to ignore. Both. He set down his glass and moved closer. Natalie, I don't know what's happening here. This wasn't supposed to be complicated. You were supposed to be a means to an end, and I was supposed to be a solution to your financial problems. Clean, simple, temporary. But it's not anymore, is it? Her voice broke. It stopped being simple weeks ago. Maybe the night you played piano for me. Or when you visited my dad without telling me. Or any of the 100 small moments when we stopped acting and started just being. Cameron ran both hands through his hair, his composure finally cracking. I'm not good at this. At feelings. At letting people in. Jessica burned me so badly that I swore I'd never put myself in that position again. I'm not Jessica, Natalie said firmly. I didn't come into this looking for love or a relationship. I came into it looking for a solution, just like you. But somewhere along the way, I started caring about you. The real you, not the contract or the money or any of it. Just you. You scare me, Cameron admitted, the words seeming torn from somewhere deep inside. You make me want things I thought I'd given up on. When I'm with you, I forget to be careful. I forget to guard my heart. And that terrifies me. Natalie crossed the distance between them, placing her hands on his chest. She could feel his heart racing under her palms. I'm scared too. But maybe being scared means we're doing something worth doing. Maybe the fact that this is hard means it matters. Cameron's hands came up to frame her face, his touch achingly gentle. What are you saying? I'm saying that maybe we should stop trying to end this and start trying to make it work. I'm saying that I'm in love with you, Cameron Westbrook. And I don't care if it's inconvenient or complicated, or if it started from the strangest circumstances imaginable. Natalie. Her name was a prayer and a question and a revelation all at once. Then he was kissing her, and it wasn't the careful, staged kiss they'd shared at the gala. This was real, desperate, full of weeks of denied feelings and the terrifying hope that maybe, just maybe, they could have something genuine. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cameron rested his forehead against hers. I love you too, he whispered. God help me, I think I've loved you since you called me out at that first dinner with Patricia, and you defended us without hesitation. You're fierce and kind, and you make me want to be better than I am. You're already better than you think you are, Natalie replied, smiling through her tears. You just needed someone to show you.